Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This is going to be a bit long because it needs some context. I'll throw in a lot of details to make it easier to understand. Some minor details might not be 100% accurate since I have no interest in reviving this conflict. I won completely and any resurrection would only taint the experience. Let's start by noting that I spent about 15 years working in security. During that time, I worked many different types of security in various locations. The one that matters for this story was time spent in the Rental Dispute Resolution Center, RDRC, in a major city, as a sort of bailiff. For those who don't know what that is, think of a courtroom. In a major city at least. In a smaller town, it might be an event room in a hotel or community center, as you'd see on TV, but with less formality and a mediator instead of a judge. They're functionally the same thing to landlords and tenants, but they're definitely not identical. This place exclusively deals with landlord and tenant disputes and is the only place to resolve such issues. Note that I wasn't technically a bailiff, and it wasn't actually a court, but these terms mostly accurately describe the situation and my role in it. For 2 years, I worked at the RDRC. It was early in my time in security. I was around 22-24. Being in a major city, the sheer number of cases I sat through was beyond counting. I saw everything there was to see. No one can surprise me with a story because I've seen them all in detail. One of my side duties was to ensure all parties had copies of all evidence being presented. I did a lot of photocopying and always read and inspected everything I copied to make sure nothing got cut off or became illegible. By the time I stopped working there, I probably knew how everything worked well enough to be a mediator myself. Well, obviously not, but I'm certainly in no need of a lawyer should I ever need to go there. I also had intimate knowledge of how the system worked beyond the actual rules. For example, mediators would always give a little leeway to anyone representing themselves over someone who had a lawyer, or how pissed off mediators would get when a party was speaking out of turn. Seriously, don't do that. Fast forward about 7 years. I left the city and moved to a fairly large town in the same state, same tenant laws. I had a few roommates in a decently sized townhouse. We got along well, but there was a problem. Only I could write checks and our paydays didn't line up, so I was the one who paid the rent, and I usually couldn't do it on the first because roommates didn't always pay on time. We advised the landlord we might be a day or two late, but would always have it by the third at the latest. They had no problem with it at all. I spoke to them myself. For about a year, this worked fine. No complaints from the landlord because even if we were often a day or two late, we always paid. We were also fairly quiet and didn't damage the property. Nearly model tenants. I don't actually know why, but one day this changed. I suspect a different person in the company started overseeing the region. One day, suddenly we got a summons to the RDRC on the 2nd of the month for failure to pay rent. This didn't actually lead to a case because we paid the same day. But now we had to pay the application fee the landlord paid to serve the summons. I complained to the neighbor who was also the superintendent and eventually heard back that their contact at the company was now demanding payment on the 1st of the month, no exceptions. Well, that really didn't work for us, so we probably had to pay that fee 15 to 20 times over the next 2 years. I could have gone to the RDRC over it, but we were technically without a leg to stand on, and I knew it. Maybe if I went enough times I could ding them for harassment, but I didn't have time for that, and my roommates didn't care. After being split between us all, the fee wasn't enough of a deterrent to change our behavior, so we accepted it. If this was the only issue, there wouldn't be much of a story. Around the same time, the rent leeway vanished, so did mandatory maintenance. I'm not going to list everything that went wrong and wasn't fixed. You'll get a decent idea at the end. We suffered through it. We were all working too many hours at lousy pay to be able to do anything about it. We adapted. But after about 2 years it broke. Everyone but me up and moved out for various reasons within a 4-month period. I'm not going into any details on my roommates because things kind of exploded for a couple of different reasons outside of this. No reason to dig any of that up. I had been saving up for a while and was able to quit my job without having to immediately get another, so I suddenly had a lot of time. I didn't want to stay and pay the rent by myself or have to find new roommates I could live with, and with my experience in the RDRC, I knew I had the landlord cornered. So I went for them. I stopped paying rent. Annoyingly, I didn't get a summons the first month, but I did the second, so I went. With a meticulously documented plethora of evidence of failure to maintain the property and entering the property without formal notice, I had a copy for the landlord and a copy for the mediator. I knew from experience that technically you're supposed to give the other party the evidence before the hearing, but I also knew about that leeway a mediator gives to those who represent themselves. So I didn't give the landlord the evidence until our case came up. 100% total ambush. When I handed over the evidence, the landlord's lawyer, Sarah, immediately objected. Your Honor, this is completely unacceptable. We weren't given any opportunity to review this evidence beforehand, Sarah protested. The mediator, a stern-looking man in his 50s, looked at me with raised eyebrows. Is there a reason you didn't provide this evidence earlier? I put on my most apologetic face. I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't aware of the proper procedure. I'm representing myself and don't have any legal training. The mediator nodded, his expression softening slightly. I see. Well, in the interest of fairness, we'll give the other party some time to review the evidence. We'll take a short recess. During the break, I could see the landlord, Greg, furiously flipping through the pages, his face growing redder by the minute. Sarah was whispering urgently to him, probably trying to come up with a strategy. When we reconvened, the mediator dismissed the case, gave me a mild reprimand, and told me to file my own summons as I should have done. This was the petty revenge. Greg and Sarah had driven 3 hours to get there for nothing. Worse than nothing. I filed my own summons, and the big day arrived. It had been about 4 months of me not paying rent at this point. I was prepared to if I lost, but I didn't think I was going to lose. The whole thing could not have gone better. I had 20-30 pages of evidence and 20-odd photographs. They had nothing. They had no actual defense for our water heater being out for 6 months, or us not having a fridge for a year, just to mention 2 severe issues. Their entire defense rested on us being late for rent, which actually worked against them once that led to the mediator learning how many times we'd paid the application fee, and lies that had no evidence to support them. During the hearing, Greg tried to interrupt me several times. At one point, I started to protest during their turn to speak, but caught myself. The mediator noticed and gave me an approving nod. Thank you for respecting the process, he said. Mr. Thompson, please refrain from interrupting. I could see the frustration building in Greg's face as the hearing progressed. His arguments were falling flat, and Sarah looked increasingly uncomfortable. But Your Honor, Greg sputtered, these tenants have been consistently late with their rent. How can we be expected to maintain the property if they can't even pay on time? The mediator's eyes narrowed. Mr. Thompson, according to the evidence presented, your company has collected numerous application fees for late payments. It seems you've been compensated for any inconvenience. Now, can you explain why essential repairs were neglected for months on end? Greg had no answer for that. I had won on every possible front. The only question was how much. It was more than I'd ever seen. I got 9 months of free rent, and the landlord was ordered to have everything fixed before the next month was over, or I'd get more. I gave notice I was leaving at the end of the 8th month and left at the end of the 9th. Because the landlord had never renewed the lease, I didn't have to give him the 3-month notice the lease specified. If you want a figure to put to it, I basically got a $16,000 judgment in my favor, adjusted for inflation and rounded. I also made Greg and Sarah drive 3 hours, twice, only to lose. Greg's face was so red at the end I thought he'd have a heart attack. He didn't, though. As we were leaving the RDRC, I couldn't resist one last jab. Hey Greg, I called out, maybe next time try fixing the fridge instead of nickel and diming your tenants. He just glared at me and stomped off. Bye, Greg. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought a simple family trip to an amusement park would turn into such a nightmare. But looking back, I guess it was bound to happen sooner or later. My name's Mike, and I'm a veteran who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I came back with more than just physical scars. PTSD has been my constant companion ever since. But I'm not the only one in my family dealing with challenges. My 10-year-old daughter, Lily, is on the autism spectrum. Life hasn't been easy for us, but we've found ways to cope. One of the biggest helps has been our therapy dog, Max. He's a gentle giant of a German Shepherd, trained to assist both me with my PTSD and Lily with her autism. Max helps keep us calm in stressful situations and provides a sense of security that's hard to describe unless you've experienced it yourself. So when my wife Sarah suggested we take a family trip to Wonderland Amusement Park for Lily's birthday, I was hesitant at first. Crowds and noise can be overwhelming for both Lily and me, but Sarah reminded me that the park had recently implemented a program for guests with disabilities, offering special passes and quiet areas throughout the park. Plus, they explicitly allowed service animals. With Max by our side, we decided to give it a shot. The day started off great. Lily was over the moon, bouncing with excitement as we entered the park. Max, wearing his official service dog vest, stayed close to Lily's side, his calm presence keeping her grounded amidst all the stimulation. We had a blast riding the kiddie coasters and playing carnival games. For a few hours, it felt like we were just a normal family enjoying a day out. But then came lunchtime, and with it, our encounter with Karen. We were standing in line at a pizza place in the food court when I first noticed her. A middle-aged woman with the classic "can I speak to the manager" haircut, designer sunglasses perched on her head. She was eyeing Max with obvious disapproval, her lips pursed into a thin line. I tried to ignore her, focusing instead on helping Lily decide what kind of pizza she wanted. Just as we reached the counter to order, I heard a shrill voice behind us. "Excuse me, but dogs aren't allowed in the food court." I turned around slowly, taking a deep breath. "Ma'am, Max is a service dog. He's allowed to be here." Karen's eyes narrowed. "That doesn't look like any service dog I've ever seen. Where's his special harness?" "He's wearing a vest that clearly identifies him as a service animal," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "That's all that's required by law." "Well, I don't care what the law says," Karen snapped. "I'm allergic to dogs, and I don't want it near me while I'm eating. You need to leave." By this point, Lily was starting to get agitated. She began flapping her hands, a self-stimulating behavior she often displays when stressed. Max immediately pressed himself against her leg, providing comforting pressure. "Look, we're not going anywhere," I said firmly. "Max is here to help my daughter, who has autism, and me. I'm a veteran with PTSD. We have every right to be here with our service dog." Karen's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "Oh, please, another faker claiming PTSD for attention. And your kid looks fine to me. She's probably just badly behaved. You should learn to discipline her instead of making up excuses." That's when I lost it. "How dare you?" I growled, stepping towards her. "You have no idea what our family has been through. You can't just—" "Daddy?" Lily's small voice cut through my anger. She was curled up on the floor now, hands over her ears, with Max standing protectively over her. The commotion had triggered a meltdown. I immediately knelt down beside her, all thoughts of Karen forgotten. "It's okay, sweetie," I murmured, gently rubbing her back. "Just focus on Max. Remember your breathing exercises." But Karen wasn't done. She started yelling about how we were making a scene and ruining everyone's lunch. She demanded that security remove us from the park immediately. A crowd had gathered by this point, most people looking uncomfortable but not intervening. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Karen reached out and grabbed Max's vest, trying to pull him away from Lily. "This dog needs to go!" she screeched. Max, bless him, didn't react aggressively. He just planted his feet firmly and refused to budge. But Lily let out a heart-wrenching wail at seeing her beloved companion manhandled. That's when our unlikely hero stepped in. A tall man in a crisp suit pushed through the crowd. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the dog and this family immediately." Karen whirled around, her face flushed with self-righteous anger. "Finally! Security! I want these people removed from the park at once! They're breaking the rules and disturbing everyone with their fake service dog!" The man's expression hardened. "I'm not security, ma'am. I'm Jonathan Reynolds, the general manager of Wonderland Amusement Park, and the only person breaking rules and disturbing others here is you." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But the dog is a legitimate service animal, as the gentleman already explained to you," Mr. Reynolds cut her off. "Wonderland has a strict policy allowing service animals in all areas of the park, including food service areas. This is in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act." He turned to address the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disturbance. Wonderland prides itself on being an inclusive environment where all guests can enjoy themselves. Discrimination of any kind, including against individuals with disabilities, is not tolerated here." Returning his attention to Karen, his voice took on a steely edge. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. Harassing guests and attempting to interfere with a service animal are serious offenses. We'll be revoking your park pass and escorting you from the premises." Karen's face went from red to pale in an instant. "You can't do that. Do you know who I am? My husband is a lawyer, and we'll sue this whole park." Mr. Reynolds remained unfazed. "You're welcome to pursue any legal action you feel is appropriate. However, I can assure you that our policies are well within the bounds of the law. Now please come with me, or I'll be forced to call actual security to remove you." As two uniformed security guards appeared to escort Karen away, she started sobbing dramatically about how unfair it all was. But her cries fell on deaf ears as she was led out of the food court. Mr. Reynolds then knelt down beside us. Sir, I want to personally apologize for what you and your family have experienced today. This is not representative of Wonderland's values or the experience we want our guests to have. I nodded, still focused on calming Lily down. Thank you. We appreciate your intervention. Please allow me to make this right, he continued. I'd like to upgrade your passes to our VIP package for the rest of your stay. This includes front-of-line access to all rides, complimentary meal vouchers, and access to our exclusive relaxation areas throughout the park. These are quieter spaces designed for guests who might need a break from the crowds and noise. Sarah, who had been quietly comforting Lily alongside me, looked up in surprise. That's very generous of you, Mr. Reynolds. Are you sure? He smiled warmly. Absolutely. It's the least we can do. And please, if you need anything else during your visit, don't hesitate to ask for me personally. As Mr. Reynolds walked away to handle the paperwork for our upgrade, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Lily was starting to calm down, her breathing evening out as she stroked Max's fur. You okay, kiddo? I asked gently. She nodded, looking up at me with tear-stained cheeks. Can we still go on more rides, Daddy? I couldn't help but chuckle. You bet we can, sweetheart. In fact, I think we're going to have an even better day than we planned. And we did. The VIP passes made the rest of our visit a breeze. We were able to enjoy all the rides Lily wanted without long waits, and the relaxation areas proved to be a godsend when things got overwhelming. By the end of the day, Lily was beaming with joy, clutching a giant stuffed unicorn I'd won her at one of the games. As we walked out of the park, exhausted but happy, I reflected on the day's events. What could have been a disaster turned into a powerful reminder of the good in people. For every Karen in the world, there are folks like Mr. Reynolds who are willing to stand up for what's right. I looked down at Lily, peacefully dozing in her stroller with Max trotting faithfully beside us, and felt a surge of pride. My little girl might face challenges, but she's the strongest person I know. And with our family's love and support, and Max's unwavering companionship, I know she can handle whatever life throws her way. As for Karen, well, I hope she learned a valuable lesson about empathy and respect. But something tells me it might take more than one amusement park ejection to change her ways. In any case, she's no longer our problem. We've got a lifetime of family adventures ahead of us, and we won't let anyone's ignorance or cruelty hold us back. The next one is a petty revenge story. Let's start by painting the picture. Over the course of the last couple of months, there's been ongoing construction work for a new building that's being, built on our street. We're living on Malta, and for those that know anything about this tiny island is that things are happening incredibly slow. The contractors that have been working on this building have left us residents in a constant state of distress due to the constant, excessive loud noise that has been our life on a daily basis for months. They've ignored several rules and regulators relating to permits to close off roads, blocking parking spaces, etc. In times when they haven't had permits to block parking spaces, they've even simply used cinder blocks to block off access to parking spaces the contractors would need the following day. The street is left in a complete mess after their work for the day is done. There's constant dust flying around in the air due to their ongoing work efforts, and one day they even blocked the entire street without having the appropriate permits for doing so. This has all been okay, as much as it can be. We've gone on with our lives and just hope that it's going to be over soon. This was our mindset until this morning when we found out that our car had been towed. They had not put up the no parking signs 48 hours in advance as is required, and we had to pay over 200 euro as a fine, which we now will have to dispute and hope that they will refund the fine. Cue the petty revenge. These contractors are ignoring so many rules and regulations on a daily basis, and considering that either me or my wife works from home all days of the week, rotating office days, we have full view of what's going on the street on a daily basis. Contractors are putting cinder blocks on parking spots to reserve them without proper permits. Suddenly, we have all the time in the world to go downstairs and remove said cinder blocks. Instead of just removing the cinder blocks to the side, we will also dispose of them so that they cannot carry out this practice in the future without having to get new cinder blocks to do so with. Heavy machinery is being used on the street after permitted time according to permits. Police local traffic enforcement number is on my speed dial. I even must have misplaced a pack of eggs that I put aside while walking past the construction area while tying my shoes and couldn't find them again. Oh boy, I hope they don't spoil and start smelling under the intense Maltese sun and heat. I've been lurking this subreddit for years, and I feel like I'm currently experiencing one of these stories in real time. I'm actually low-key excited. If there's any noteworthy updates, I may update the post later on. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Back in my high school days, the school decided that the parking lot speed limit for cars would be 5 mph. In theory, a good thing. Reduces the chance of collisions greatly, and any that happen should be very minor. Now here's the thing. The number of people that followed that is exactly 0. Not the parents, not the teachers, not the students. We are a K-12 school, so it was mostly parents. Now the administration, who has since been going on monthly power trips, didn't like that and decided to start handing out speeding tickets. Written warnings that you would lose your parking pass and get an email home. So we, the 32 of 100 high schoolers who had cars, decided to play around with it. Now normally, car line takes about 20 minutes between when we leave. We get out a few minutes early so our cars are out of the way. And when car line is mostly done, aside from a few stragglers, and that's with most cars going at about 10 to 15 minutes in the giant parking lot we had, which couldn't be used for parents to park. Well, that's too short, we decided. So, we complied in the most malicious way possible. Every high schooler with a car did 5 mph through the parking lot. Normally, by the time the smaller kids got into their cars, we were gone, but not anymore. We were crawling through the parking lot at idle speed. What normally took 5 minutes to clear 30 cars now took 10, and it had consequences. The entire car line for the other 500 students was not also moving at idle speed. Car line started taking 30 minutes on a good day. To say parents were livid is an understatement. Complaints filled the Facebook page, and the sassier parents reminded everyone that we just followed rules set by the beloved admin, beloved everywhere but the high school. With only one way out, and us having to get out before parents because we were literally in the way, our change screwed up the entire car line. In fact, it got so bad that the school was told to fix it by the city or there would be consequences since we started backing up a major road during rush hour. At the start of the next year, the habit fell out since most of that 30 people had left and we went back to going a safe but above the speed limit speed in the parking lot. It's been 2 years, not a thing has been said. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.